Hello, everyone out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So we're gonna be doing the show. Well, you probably won't notice anything on your end. I was having some computer issues earlier, hence kind of the late start. We're still gonna talk about all of the issues. I don't think I'm gonna be able to include my co-host today, just because I've got some technical limitations. Um, some weird's going on with my computer and the Zoom program, but I'm not going to bore y'all with the minutia of that. It's better for us to just go ahead and get into what is going on. So I've got a couple of local issues I want to start with. There is a Kalamazoo story that I am going to hit. Now, I know usually I would do that first, but I think I'm going to start with something. Actually, I'm going to kind of go backwards, start something at the national level, because everybody, I'm sure, saw last weekend, the big No Kings demonstration. I think they got up to 8 million people this time, and I was almost the elder millennials know this reference. Oregon Trail, you've died of dysentery. It's like I have died of No Kings discourse. Because if you've been anywhere on social media, it's this constant back and forth of people saying, the No Kings protests are important, they're revolutionary. Other people saying they're useless, performative activism that is trying to sheepdog people into the Democratic Party. Some people saying it's worth the time of leftists and socialists to engage with people at the No Kings protests. Some saying it's better to stay home or better to build a guillotine in your garage, which is honestly, that's a cute, fun joke, but that's a little anachronistic. Anyway, what is my 2 cents about the No Kings protest as somebody who, I've spent a few years as an organizer. I've spent more years than that as a political commentator. And my 2 cents is, is it a performative, activist sheepdog into the Democratic Party effort? Is it something that can be used to radicalize people? All of the above. Yes, the answer is yes. And what I mean by that is this. The No Kings protests are, they are organized by these large NGO nonprofits that are connected to the Democratic Party. And that means their politics are far more centrist than the average American. In fact, I believe a couple of the founders of the No Kings protests are actually Zionists. However, that's not going to stop people at the No Kings protest, especially depending where they're at, from flying like the Palestinian flag. And that's where I think it's important, and I know this is kind of a cliche, we need to discuss the No Kings protests with a level of nuance. I know it's maybe one of the most beat to death overused terms in internet discourse, but I think it is important for folks to understand that these protests are very tame on this stuff. It's almost you almost don't want to call them a protest because they're not particularly disruptive. It's more like a parade or a party. But what it does do is it draws out people all over the country, all over the world, in fact, who are dissatisfied with the status quo. And some of them may be really early in their political development. They may just believe Orange Man bad without making any deeper systemic critiques. Some folks are, and I would wager most folks, and this is really true of the majority of Americans, don't really engage politically, understand that the system is wrong, the system is corrupt. They don't necessarily have all the knowledge and tools to, figure out what is the best way to dismantle all of this. But the state of things is drawing the people out in the street who have never gone out into the street before. My main argument is this, and I think it's an argument that a lot of principled leftist organizations have taken to heart, whether you're the Party for Socialism and Liberation, whether you are, you're the DSA, whether you're, the Socialist Equality Party. I could go down the whole laundry list. Socialist Party USA, all the leftist orgs, and all the like anarchist affinity groups. And I think the correct conclusion, I believe, is it is important to go out to these events, to interface, to network, to talk with people, especially newer people who haven't been out in the streets before, who, I think a lot of, justified critique has been made about like these events draw out millions of people, but they don't lay out any next steps. They don't, build towards something bigger. Yeah, I think a good comparison, is like Minneapolis. Minneapolis residents got onto the streets, of course, but they also did a day-long general strike. And now, it was more of like a proof of concept. It was to kind of show off the muscle of the working class in that area. But there were next steps involved that led to a tangible disruption, something that could build towards leverage against the ruling class. That is, in fact, absent from the structure of No Kings. All of the energy that, at least from the top of the No Kings and 50-51 organizations, is largely about the midterms and getting Democrats elected. I will say some progress has been made on that. At least if you talk to the rank and file, it isn't just, we can't elect radical leftist Democrats. Even a lot of like the dyed-in-the-wool blue dog Democrats, some of the salt and pepper haired folks you'll find at these demonstrations are really fed up with the current class of Democratic politicians. Many octogenarians, septuagenarians, who think it's still the 1990s, think it's still the Clinton administration and act accordingly. And to the credit of those masses, they are a lot more receptive towards politicians like Zohran Mamdani and Abdul El Said and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who of course, I'm the Marxist radio guy, so I definitely have my criticisms of them from the left. But it is a step in the right direction, where even somebody who you would call a centrist liberal 10 years ago is now receptive to politicians with social democratic ideas. And in fact, some even think that should be the direction that the Democratic Party should head. That being said, these the design of these from the top is to try to bring people back towards electoralism and tolerance of centrist politicians who really aren't going to change that much. Like the golden boy of the Democratic Party right now is Gavin Newsom, who is, if you're an old head like me, you remember back in the mid-2000s, John Kerry ran against George W. Bush and was like, he's a flip-flopper. Talk about flip-flops. This guy will flip a coin and look at poll numbers, and depending on the day, he will call the genocide in Gaza a genocide or not, or he will call Israel an apartheid state or not, or he will support starving the nation of Cuba or not. This is the class of politician that the Democratic Party wants people to rally around, and boy, is it upset that people are demanding a little bit more. But there is this concern, especially of these No Kings demonstrations, trying to shepherd low information people who have not seen the story before, or at least do not pay enough attention to see the story before, get bamboozled again into voting for a losing strategy. And I think there is important work for more leftward groups, whatever issue they're working on, to make interventions and try to get people who are earnestly want to get more involved, want to create change where they live. Present that intervention, present these ideas, educate, organize, agitate, and there is a large potential to do it at these No Kings protests, because it's much the same reason that any leftist org would table at a block party or a public event. Although in this case, you're even more particularly geared towards people who are there for political reasons. Um, and I also do want to highlight, not because two things can be true. The leadership of main leadership of No Kings 5051 is more centrist, even Zionist, etc. But that is not true of every branch of these organizations. I think it's worth noting we ran a story last year about how Michigan's 5051, one of the main orgs organizing these No Kings protests, came out with a very strong anti-genocide statement, expressing solidarity with the people of Gaza. I know the people who run the No Kings 5051 stuff in Kalamazoo on a personal level, and they are aware. They are aware of a lot of these issues. They are aware of the way that these rallies can be kind of used to sheepdog people back into failed status quo institutions and strategies. And people who have actually been involved in the organizing community in Kalamazoo for some time. So again, every town, every area is different, and some places are going to be more astroturf than others. I mean, it is, as much as the right wing is pushing this idea that everybody was paid to do what they do. I mean, you can see examples of this that absolutely belie that fact. A dozen people in a small rural town waving signs and they're on their main street. Like, it's very unlikely. I think that George Soros' Rolodex is not that thick. But I mean, obviously that's a pretty long-standing canard. Paid protesters. And again, this kind of inability from the inner echelons of the MAGA cult, inability to believe that people really do disagree. So many people disagree with what is going on. So anyway, the correct answer is organize the masses. There were a lot of masses out there that weekend. Everybody out there who was trying to organize those masses, I salute you. Unless you're trying to organize them into like the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, in which case I'd say get bent. And the last 10 years of hell is a lot, in the large part, your fault. Thanks, but no thanks. Anyway. And also, but for the other ultra leftist side, who say it's useless to engage with this stuff. It's just like, that's part of organizing. You got to talk to people who don't agree with you, like who are not like ready to, join the Bolshevik, the Bolshevik army. All right, because necessarily most people in America are not educated to that level. They're not ready to do that kind of thing. And as we've talked a lot on the show, foolish adventurism, like if you're talking about violent revolution or whatever. I should underscore, if you look, the old school Leninist line about, taking over the state, the working class taking over the state. Honestly, by the time the Trump administration's done with it, I think they're gonna wither the state away so bad. By the time I think there's a mass movement in this country ready to do that sort of thing, we're going to have to build a new state from scratch. Or the country may, in fact, just balkanize. Also, I think it's worth noting, the U.S. state has a monopoly on violence, and it is worth pointing out that, any sort of violent insurrection that is not in support of capitalism would very easily get crushed by the imperialist boot. But there are tools at our disposal that, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the general strike. The last time the working class of this country were able to really bring the capitalists to their knees, it was because they knew how to leverage the tool of a general strike, which is not, by the way, not an easy thing to do. I'm already seeing flyers all over the internet that, general strike on May 1st, the general strike, and, it kind of reminds me, you guys know that clip from The Office, what is it, I declare, what is it, The Office, I declare, hold on. Oh, I declare bankruptcy. Yeah. It's kind of like, going on the internet and just shouting I declare general strike. And it's like, you actually have to organize it. You can't just say general strike and expect it to happen. It's like, I didn't say it, I declared it. And the thing is, you can't just share flyers around on the internet. It's like, oh, general strike on May 1st. It's probably not going to happen. Like, you got to keep in mind, like, the people in Minneapolis didn't organize that day-long general strike just because, hey, guys, this is a good idea. Let's pencil it in for next Tuesday. No, like, labor unions, businesses, groups, all had to be talking about it for months and months. And they also had to have this pressure cooker moment where ICE was just causing mass anger of the population in Minneapolis for there to be the level of buy-in necessary for that general strike. So I think that's where we need to go next. I think that's the escalation that should flow out of No Kings. The escalation is not vote in the midterms. It's no. That's even if we had like an army of Zoran Mamdanis running, that is not the next step. The next step is to throw our weight around and flex our muscle at the ruling class, and the way to do that is through these kind of general strike and boycott actions. With that, I'm going to read this article from Left Voice talking a bit more about No Kings. It's published on March 28th. Biggest No Kings demonstration ever brings millions to the streets. This is written by James Dennis Hoff and Samuel Carlin. To say things are not going well for Donald Trump would be an understatement. In just the last 48 hours, 12 U.S. soldiers were seriously injured in a massive strike on the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Iranian-allied Houthis launched attacks against Israel, expanding yet another front in a war the president is trying desperately to bring to a close. U.S. stocks capped off a fifth consecutive week of losses. Gasoline prices in California and Washington reached an all-time high, and a new report shows the U.S. inflation is expected to exceed 4% by the end of the year. Meanwhile, on Saturday, more than 8 million people across the U.S. and hundreds of thousands more across the world took to the streets with many different complaints, but one common slogan, F Trump. From London and Rome to New York and Los Angeles, and 1,000 small towns and cities in every state in between, demonstrators rallied and marched to protest Trump's increasingly unpopular policies and the international far right he supports. Like previous No Kings days, protesters carried signs and chanted slogans criticizing Trump, calling attention to his ties to child trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, and decrying his authoritarian overreach. Many protesters also raised more concrete political demands related to the economy, the war in Iran, Trump's imperialist policies in Latin America, and the repression of immigrants by ICE and the Customs and Border Patrol. In this way, many of the No Kings protests this third time around took on a different, more combative, and more working-class character, particularly with respect to the war. The official slogan of the protests was No ICE, No War, No Kings. Outrage against ICE has been a staple of the No Kings mobilizations, but with the war in Iran now approaching the 1-month mark, this added a new layer to the rallies. Left Voice correspondents in New York City, Minneapolis, Detroit, and Los Angeles reported widespread anti-war sentiment. In Minneapolis, during a speech by Bernie Sanders, the crowd broke out into a spontaneous chant of End the War. In New York City, more than 100,000 protesters gathered in Columbus Circle on the south side of Central Park before heading down Broadway through Times Square to 34th Street. Protesters carried signs that read No War with Iran, Shinga La Migra, and No War on Cuba. Left Voice members marched alongside other leftists and unions with banners reading Abolish ICE, Fight for Full Rights for Immigrants, and Down with the Imperialist War on Iran, in an effort to bring a revolutionary perspective to the growing fight against the far right. There were important expressions of the labor movement in the streets as well. In New York, PSC CUNY had a large contingent made up of faculty who had been fighting to defend immigrant communities in New York. In Los Angeles, SEIU had a strong presence, and other unions like Unite Here and the UTLA were visible. Following the mass economic blackout in Minneapolis at the beginning of the year, many Americans have begun to see the role labor can play in movements against oppression. In fact, at the rally in Minneapolis, it was announced that May Day would be the next major day of action. However, the labor bureaucracy has largely limited the participation of unions, encouraging their members to participate as individuals, but not mobilizing their memberships in large, clearly visible contingents. In Minnesota, where neighborhood groups organized to push ICE out of Minneapolis, a huge flagship rally of tens of thousands of people was held outside the Capitol building in St. Paul. The rally, the largest in Minnesota history, included speeches by left-wing Democratic Party politicians like Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar, as well as performances by Bruce Springsteen and Rage Against the Machine's Tom Morello. Though at times more like a Democratic Party campaign rally than a protest, the first speaker kicked off the rally with the chant, "No kings, no ICE, no war." This shows how the fight against ICE in Minneapolis has changed the narrative since the last No Kings rally in October. It also shows a growing rejection of Trump's war against Iran and his attacks on Venezuela and Cuba. Other cities that have consistently turned out for previous No Kings days, such as Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, Atlanta, and San Diego, once again flooded the streets. Many participants in small towns throughout the country proudly shared their participation on social media. Today's massive demonstrations are more evidence that Trump, whose approval ratings continue to fall, may in fact be the most unpopular U.S. president ever. They also show that there are huge sectors of people across the U.S. who are hungry for an alternative to the endless series of crises and wars they've been offered by both parties. While the Democratic Party and the organizers of many of today's rallies are doing everything they can to drive this energy and anger back into the Democratic Party in the midterm elections, discontent with both parties remains high. Likewise, as the idea of a general strike continues to gain traction among both the left and the progressive wing of the labor bureaucracy, millions of people are looking to organize beyond marches like these that are called every 3 months and only last a single day. Imagine what this same number of people could accomplish if they took the struggle into their workplaces. However, to actually defeat Trump and ensure that another monster does not take his place, the working class and oppressed have to organize to put an end to the system that produced him in the first place. This means rejecting the false alternative of the Democrats or the idea that the working class can somehow vote its way out of this mess. Despite their limitations, these protests point the way toward the importance of uniting all of our struggles and the necessity of building a united front to defeat Trump's regime and lay the ground for a true independent working class alternative with a socialist horizon. That was Left Voice, written by James Dennis Hoff and Samuel Carlin, published on March 28th. Biggest No Kings demonstration ever brings millions into the streets. We're gonna take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep it on lock. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Welcome back, everyone. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. I've got a couple of Kalamazoo stories we want to tackle real quick. First, this is an update to a story we reported on a bit more extensively a few weeks ago. Situation at the People's Food Co-op. A lot of questions about transparency and democracy. What is ostensibly supposed to be a democratically community-run institution. There's an update on the change.org petition as of March 28th. I'm just going to read from it real quick. Concerned owners of the People's Food Cooperative of Kalamazoo are seeking signatures on 2 petitions. One will enable owners to hold a vote on whether or not to recall the current board of directors. The other will enable owners to call a special meeting to elect a new board if the recall vote passes. Below is an update on the current situation at PFC, followed by details about the petitions. On January 25th, without prior communication to owners or previously documented board concerns, the PFC Board of Directors voted to terminate long-term General Manager Alex Morris and enter a paid contractor agreement with then Board President James Bridgeforth to serve as interim General Manager. This decision raises significant concerns about alignment with PFC's established policies and cooperative governance principles. Under the approved succession plan, in the event of a sudden General Manager departure, senior staff are intended to maintain operations while a search for a new general manager is conducted. Since that time, PFC has experienced a period of rapid and substantial change. Multiple long-term and senior staff members have been terminated or have resigned, 6 and 3 staff respectively as of March 28th. These individuals cite concerns about management approach and workplace conditions. PFC storefront operations and stock, especially from local vendors, have suffered significantly. At the governance level, 6 board members have resigned since January. Public statements from departing members reference concerns about the circumstances leading up to the decision and the action taken to replace the general manager with the then board president, James Bridgeforth. The board not following bylaws or cooperative governance principles, and the board's ability to address ongoing issues. The current board has filled these vacancies through appointment, exceeding that which is permitted by state law, and not allowing these seats to be elected by owners. The board is now making decisions in closed executive sessions without public minutes on issues that warrant owner input and oversight. The board has indicated that it is pursuing a second retail location in the short term, a major institutional change requiring a new business plan, but has provided owners with no information about this initiative. These actions raise additional questions about adherence to the People's Food Co-op's bylaws, state statute, and cooperative governance practices, and show a sustained pattern of operating without transparency. Many owners have sought clarity about these developments, including the rationale for leadership decisions, the status of PFC's financial health, and the plan for long-term management. To date, clear and consistent communication addressing these questions has not been provided, and a public search for a permanent general manager has not been announced. PFC is a cooperative owned by its members. Its strength depends on transparent governance, accountable leadership, and active owner participation. When there's uncertainty about decision-making processes, leadership structure, and organizational direction, it affects not only daily operations but the long-term health and identity of the co-op. Owners are circulating 2 petitions. One is to allow owners to have a vote on whether to recall the current board, and the other is to call a special meeting of owners for the purpose of electing a new board if the recall is successful. I will link to this page in our show notes. But yeah, just a quick update to kind of situation we reported on a few weeks ago about what is going on at People's Food Co-op. I'm going to take another much quicker break. We come back. I wanted to talk about some local Copaganda. Kind of start to piece it apart a little bit. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your source for political revolution. Welcome back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So I want to talk about this article from the Gazette, M Live. It's called How Kalamazoo Police Are Working to Break the Cycle of Chronic Homelessness. And came across my feed. There's a local organizer activist who was kind of calling attention to to this article. And so we filed this kind of thing, Copaganda, the same kind of like Law and Order, the cop shows, which is to say, it is pieces, articles, media that is made to give a kind of heroic veneer to the practice of policing, and as we've talked a lot about on the show, and don't take my word for it, read your history books. Modern American policing really traces its roots back to 2 institutions: strike breaking and slave catching. That's not to say there are not individual officers who, have not gotten that memo, are trying to genuinely be helpful. But, I want to really point out, the reason leftists, disdain policing as an institution is not because we hate individual police officers. It's the very fact that, any cop is going to have to do unethical, immoral things by virtue of their job. The nicest cop you have ever met, if they want to keep their job, if he is ordered to carry out the eviction, let's say of an elderly woman with nowhere else to go, then it is literally their job to do that, despite the fact that that's immoral. But those are the rules under capitalism, y'all. So I kind of that's just my go-to example for this stuff. But this article does a couple of things that I think are worth commenting on. Again, it's trying to uplift the role of Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety and trying to make interventions with houseless people to offer them resources. One of the things they talk about, they ride along with mental health professionals the community service team. Now, if I were writing this article, I might focus more on the mental health professionals. Like, here's the thing, and another point that gets brought up, you don't have to, have disdain or an intellectual, historically based, grounded understanding of policing to understand that the average police officer should not be, the be-all, end-all when it comes to dealing with homelessness or with the mental health crises that a lot of houseless people, some houseless people are, undergoing. And I only say that because, by the way, it is a stereotype that a lot of, houseless people have mental health issues. However, there are a lot of people with mental health issues in Kalamazoo who happen to be homeless because we have a lot of mental health resources. But again, there's a dearth of resources that are able to keep those same people stabilized in stable housing. And again, talking about probably one of the bigger sins this article does is referencing city-funded bus tickets. And I'm going to quote directly from the article. KDPS offers city-funded bus tickets out of town for people with nowhere to live, looking for a way to a different part of the country. It's one of the most shameful and embarrassing things I think the city's ever done is putting our money, our tax money, into these bus vouchers. Because it literally, however you try to dress it up, it's literally trying to make it, we're going to take this homeless person and make it someone else's problem. They can go be homeless somewhere else. It is trying to reduce the houseless population in this town in the most shameless way possible by offering them no actual resources to speak of, but saying like, hey, if you want to be homeless somewhere else, here's a bus ticket. It is literally just about moving people around and not actually addressing the problem. Excuse me. There's also worth noting, and again, the person who shared a broader critique about this and pointed this out is, they tries to put the onus on houseless people for not seeking out these resources or engaging with the police. Let me be clear, no matter who you are, most people, I should say, if they're having an interaction with an unsolicited interaction with a police officer, their goal is probably to try to get out of it as quickly as possible. Especially if you're a houseless person, the power dynamic there is you're afraid of getting arrested. So a lot of it is like, yes sir, no sir, thank you sir. Also, we have to keep in mind houseless people often have a hard time maintaining, their inability or incapacity to keep a direct line of communication, again, with a cop, may be reliant on the fact that, a lot of houseless people do not have access to phone plans and, this sort of thing. They don't have a steady line of communication. They might need to change numbers, that kind of sort of thing. Excuse me. Also, the article really doesn't point out that the number of clinicians on staff, they do not really have enough to fill the need in the community. But I think the main thing is that, it tries to uplift police as doing, they're out there trying to solve the homeless housing crisis. And I mean, I'm sure some of the individual officers are, trying to be decent human beings here, but it doesn't serve anyone's interest to, one, try to kind of uplift the policing as an institution that's going to somehow fix homelessness. Two, I think it doesn't draw enough attention to the dearth of resources that is creating this problem in the first place. And it really, again, gesturing at the bus ticket program as some sort of net positive, when all it does is try to, again, shuffle the problem around. Um, and this isn't to pick on the author of this article too much. We've highlighted some of their work in past episodes. They did a really good article about living conditions at the Millwood Trailer Park. But it's hard to understand where this article is really coming from because it isn't talking about the root of this problem. It's not talking about how we're actually going to. It's a puff piece. It's trying to again uplift policing uh, as a solution to the housing crisis when that solution has more to do with, again, the problem is not more policing to interact with houseless people. It's more housing for houseless people to live in. Kalamazoo has the housing stock, but it's mostly being hoarded by landlords and property development companies who care more about profit than about making sure housing is a human right. So we'll link to that article in the show notes. Again, that was from the Kalamazoo Gazette, written by Brad Devereaux, published on March 27th. How Kalamazoo police are working to break the cycle of chronic homelessness. Spoiler alert, they're not. They're putting a Band-Aid on a gashing wound and running around like SpongeBob and Patrick saying, "Yay, Patrick, we saved the city." All right, like, really. Even the ones who are actually like doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. Go arrest a landlord. There you go. All right, y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, or the Media Cyphers podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. This next story, this is based in Michigan as well, and this is the moral rot in even like state politics here in Michigan. It's basically a story about a politician spreading misinformation, attacking a program that provides a vital social safety net for new families and new mothers. New families. I'm going to kind of comment on it as I go along, but let's go ahead and this is from Michigan Advance. Michigan GOP lawmakers' baseless RX kids abortion claim, disputed by data, called despicable. It's written by Catherine Daly, published on March 30th. At a GOP fundraiser in Oakland County, alongside U.S. Representative Tom Barrett from Charlotte and Michigan House Appropriations Committee Chair Representative Ann Bolin, alleged that money from RX Kids, a prenatal and infant direct cash support program, was going to parents who would take the money and then get abortions. In audio first published by Distill Social, Bolin called the program No Guardrails Welfare for Pregnant Women and in the First Year of a Child's Life. No income requirements, no guardrails, don't even know how long they've lived in Michigan. You can say, "Hey, I'm signing up for this, I'm so-and-so and I'm pregnant," she continued. Then they can abort that baby so they can collect months of this and then abort their baby, and they've got that money, or they get it for the first couple of months. Again, just talking completely out of her butt. This is like the situation she's talking about has literally never happened. Anyway, there's no evidence to Bolin's claims about mothers collecting the money available to them prenatally and then getting abortions. Dr. Mona Hanna, who founded RX Kids in Flint and leads the program through the state, noted that evidence actually shows that the program is supporting mothers' decisions to keep their baby and not have an abortion for financial reasons, adding that the program is supported by the Michigan Catholic Conference, which is notably against abortion for being pro-family. Again, a lot of these politicians, there's this Republican fundamentalist line about how we need more babies, we need more families. But again, of course, the criticism is like it's all about getting them out of the womb, and after that, it's just the dog eat dog, sink or swim, pal. You bet. Hey, baby, go get a job in the mines. Like they might as well what they're be saying. And it's like somebody actually has the initiative to create a program that incentivizes people to have children, that makes it easier for them to have kids, and these politicians, this type of politician that is all about like no social safety net, like defund, like any program that actually helps people is somehow amoral. They can't stand it, and they end up like contradicting themselves. You do have some Republicans even who support programs like this along those lines, like we want more people having kids, but a certain line of austerity obsessed politician, the idea of handing out money to people so it's easier for them to start families, is anathema. They just need to be doing it out of, like, I don't know, duty to the US or Jesus or whatever, without looking at the how expensive it is to have children, and also just like, again, it's like that thing. Republicans are scratching their heads like, why are we having like a baby bust? Why are people having more kids? It's like, well, maybe it's because you created a country that doesn't have a functioning healthcare system, and is again slashing and gutting the bare minimum social safety net that we did have. Yeah, gee, I wonder why people aren't having more kids. That's a real Scooby-Doo mystery there. Anyway, going on. Additionally, eligibility for the program requires that moms receiving money are 16 or more weeks pregnant, and statistics reported by KFF show that around 96% of abortions take place at 15 weeks or earlier. Proponents of the program, which had $18.5 million in funding cut during the slashing of work project funding at the end of 2025 by Boland's committee, a decision that was heavily criticized as undemocratic, were quick to attack Boland for her comments on the program. Once again, Michigan Republicans like Matt Hall and Ann Boland are using their platform to attack some of the most vulnerable Michiganders, newborns, and mothers, said Michigan Democratic Party spokesperson Sarah Isaacson in a press release from the party. It's despicable, but Michigan Democrats will continue to stand up for every mother and child that Republicans have abandoned. Boland did not respond to a request for comment from the Michigan Advance. Her comments follow an attack on RX Kids in February by Michigan House Speaker Matt Hall, who accused the program, again without evidence, that the program is designed to attract undocumented immigrants so they can vote illegally for Democrats. Again, this is another tactic of the right, because, they say, here's the thing, they understand, taking money away from newborns and mothers is an unpopular position. Nobody is going to support that. Their own base is not going to support that. But if they can scratch a little bit at the xenophobia and racism of people, if they can make it sound like this money is going to people who don't deserve it, that is a line of attack, even if it, absolutely, of course, it's false, that they can, get leverage to try to, again, literally taking candy from a baby, Going on, earlier in March, RX Kids, which is administered by Michigan State University, released a report on how the money given out through the program is being used. The money, $1,500 during pregnancy, and babies receive $500 per month for either 6 or 12 months after birth, depending on location, is intentionally provided without limits on what it can be spent on in order to provide flexibility to parents before and after the birth of the child. We are delivering on that and bringing this program to Republican babies and Democratic babies and all babies because, by and large, this is nonpartisan work, Hannah said. The majority of the funding, the report showed, went to baby supplies, food, rent, or housing expenses, and utilities. The report also demonstrated virtually no spending on luxury or discretionary items, reinforcing decades of research that families use direct support to meet essential needs. The beauty of RX Kids is that we are trusting moms, she added. This is a program that trusts women to decide and families decide how best to meet their needs. This article, again, Michigan Advance, that was from Catherine Daly. Michigan GOP lawmakers' baseless RX Kids abortion claim disputed by data, called despicable. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Well, as the name of the show is Media Cyphers, I've got a couple articles here, and we might wrap the show a little bit early today, maybe closer to like 1:30, 1:40. But both of these articles are about, basically the state of modern American journalism, and I want to start with a piece from the World Socialist website about an incident that just happened in the West Bank. And yeah, Israel's been in the news lately. I don't know if you've heard, they started a war with Iran. They're not willing to deploy ground troops. Isn't that funny? Oh, also, again, it's a lot of people don't pay attention to, foreign politics, but they just passed a law in the Knesset. That's like their parliament, their Congress, legalizing the death penalty, but only for Palestinians. Oh, isn't that fun? And ghouls like Ben Kavir, they were literally wearing nooses, little like noose cufflink pendants or whatever. Man, it's the thing is, we always talk about workers of the world unite, and look. One could say we live in America. It's one of the most reactionary countries on the planet. We're like throwing stones in a glass house. But you look at the way these Israeli politicians and even a lot of rank and file Israeli workers talk about Palestinians. These people are just lost in the fascist sauce, just deep, deep, deep. You would have to go swim in some deep pressure to pull these people out of it, because they just actively cheering on being able to summarily execute political prisoners. It's some pretty gross stuff. And even people who are ostensibly their allies or who, the decorum of empire, you'd think they'd have to treat with some level of safety and respect, are also they're also violating their rights. They're beating them up. This is a story actually about a CNN news team that was assaulted by some IOF soldiers in the West Bank. This is from Kevin Reed, the World Socialist website. It was published yesterday. Or actually earlier today, 13 hours ago. So yeah, right around midnight. On Friday, a group of 3 Israeli soldiers assaulted and detained a CNN news team who were in the northern West Bank village of Tyasir to report on the aftermath of a settler attack and the establishment of a new illegal Zionist settler outpost. The crew, reporter Jeremy Diamond, who's a pretty well-known mainstream centrist liberal CNN commentator. This is somebody who's usually he is not a radical or anti-colonial activist or anything of that nature. Anyway, Jeremy Diamond, producer Abir Salman, and photojournalist Cyril Theophilos were set upon by armed soldiers who pointed rifles at them, ordered them to sit down, placed Theophilos in a chokehold, damaged camera equipment, and detained the team for roughly 2 hours. CNN reported that journalists were speaking with Palestinian residents in Tyasir after settlers had attacked people in the village and erected an unauthorized outpost in the area, when Israeli soldiers intervened to stop the journalists from filming. The CNN crew was covering a settler assault on Palestinian residents in Tyasir after settlers had entered the village overnight, fired weapons into the air, attacked several Palestinians, and injured at least 4 people, including a 75-year-old man, Abdullah Deramek, who was beaten in his home and later filmed in hospital with a swollen face and a bandage across it. During the assault, a recording made by the team captured a soldier shouting, "Stop, sit down," before another soldier approached Theophilos from behind, seized him in a chokehold, and forced him to the ground. The video also recorded the soldiers discussing revenge and making clear that they viewed the West Bank as belonging to Jews. At least one soldier has been identified in reporting by the Times of Israel as Mir, a masked IDF soldier who spoke on camera with CNN's Jeremy Diamond and said the outpost was illegal under Israeli law, but would become a legal settlement. The other soldier who physically assaulted photojournalist Cyril Theophilos has so far not been publicly named. The Times of Israel report says Mir and another soldier could also be heard telling Diamond in the report, when asked if they think the West Bank belonged to them, "We're here because it's our land," quote unquote, the Jews. And by the way, just as a quick aside, we've got a lot of discourse going on about anti-Semitism coming from the left and all that stuff, and it's even a lot of American Jewish folks are turning away from this abject fascism that we're seeing out of Israel. Not in our name is probably the best phrase I could think to describe it. Because these Israeli soldiers think that they're defending Judaism or Israel or whatever, and if anything, they're making the world less safe for Jews because they are acting like absolute violent ghouls and claiming that this is done in the name of their religion. I just wanted to say that as a quick aside. Its initial official response to the attack on press rights, the IDF said the soldiers' conduct was incompatible with that is expected of IDF soldiers operating in the Judea and Samaria area, and promised a review. This is basically what the IDF says when, oops, they beat up the wrong people. They did not. They treated those CNN personnel like they treat Palestinians. That was the error. That was the mistake that was made, if you're really kind of reading between the lines of what they're saying. The IDF also reported that one soldier was dismissed from military service. This response was framed as an internal disciplinary matter without acknowledging that soldiers were acting as enforcers of the Zionist regime, whose day-to-day operations are focused on the dispossession and terrorization of Palestinians. The attack in Taysir is part of the escalation that began with the Gaza genocide and has spread across the region. In the West Bank, the killing of Palestinians by Israeli forces and settlers has intensified dramatically throughout the assault on Gaza, with UN and rights groups documenting a rising death toll and repeated attacks by settlers acting under IDF protection. As of March 2026, reports cited by humanitarian rights organizations placed the numbers of Palestinians killed in the occupied West Bank at 1,071 since October 7, 2023. The Gaza genocide was also extended into Lebanon, where Israel has carried out repeated strikes that have killed civilians, journalists, and other non-combatants, while occupying southern areas under the pretext of security and buffer zones. Human Rights Watch reported at least 3,445 conflict-related deaths in Lebanon from October 7, 2023 to mid-November 2024. The attack on the CNN team is part of Israel's deadly war on journalists. The Committee to Protect Journalists have reported that Israel was responsible for more journalist deaths in 2025 and that it has killed more journalists than any government on record. In Lebanon, Israeli strikes have repeatedly killed media workers, including the March 2026 attack that killed Ali Shoaibi, Fatima Fatouni, and Mohammed Fatouni. In Gaza, where foreign journalists are barred and Palestinian reporters have assumed the burden of bearing witness under bombardment, the toll has been catastrophic. Meanwhile, according to the United Nations, OHCHR report cited in August 2025, at least 247 Palestinian journalists have been killed in Gaza since October 7, 2023. CPJ has reported that by late March 2026, the total number of press members killed in Lebanon since the war began has reached 11. The West Bank has long been treated by the Israeli state as a laboratory for legalized criminality. Since 1967, the occupation has evolved into a system in which land seizure, settlement expansion, and armed settler violence are shielded by the army and normalized by the state apparatus. Settlers routinely attack Palestinian villages, burn property, assault residents, and seize land through new outposts, while the IDF intervenes not to stop the aggression, but to manage it in a way that secures the colonization project. For decades, Palestinians have been killed, beaten, and displaced, while Israeli authorities shield perpetrators and convert security into a cover for ethnic expansion. The ongoing campaign in the West Bank is not separate from Gaza. It is the same program of dispossession adapted to different terrain. All these crimes have accelerated under the cover of the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran, which began on February 28th. CNN said the assault on its crew was an unprovoked attack and demanded an explanation and accountability for this unprovoked assault. The network also said that its journalists were clearly identifiable as press, that the crew was covering rising settler violence in the area, and that the attack occurred despite the team following wartime regulations. A statement by the Foreign Press Association on Saturday said the use of force was excessive and dangerous, pointing rifles at journalists and civilians, physically assaulting a cameraman, and detaining a crew are actions that cross every line. Such behavior reflects a deeply alarming pattern of hostility towards the media and cannot be tolerated under any circumstances. The U.S. government has not responded to the attack, and this silence is sending a clear political message. Washington is the chief sponsor, financier, and diplomatic protector of Israeli state's operations in Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon. The lack of even a token defense of press rights by the Trump administration once again demonstrates that the U.S. ruling class is dispensing with democratic rights in pursuit of global hegemony and views Israel's war crimes as a critical element of its strategic regional goals. You can find that article. That's from the World Socialist website, written by Kevin Reed. CNN news team assaulted and detained by Israeli soldiers in the West Bank. Gonna move to an article from Truthout that goes a little bit closer to home. Some of this you may have heard before, but it's a good summation, I think, of kind of the state of journalism under the current Trump administration. This was written by Mike Ludwig, published on March 26th. Trump isn't just bullying journalists, he's subverting the First Amendment. FCC Chair Brendan Carr made a social media post on March 15th that free speech advocates say will go down in history as a blatant attempt at wartime censorship. Instead of warning consumers about current efforts by billionaire oligarchs to consolidate cable news broadcasters under their control, the FCC chair threatened the broadcasters by suggesting they could lose licenses over coverage of the war on Iran that the Trump administration dislikes. Congress created the FCC to manage limited airwaves on behalf of consumers independently from the White House. But critics say Carr consistently conflates the public interest with Donald Trump's desire to control the media. Broadcasters must operate in the public interest, and they will lose their licenses if they do not, Carr wrote on social media. Carr included a screenshot of a post from Trump complaining about news coverage of damage sustained by the U.S. military in the war. A day earlier, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth attacked CNN for reporting that the White House underestimated Iran's willingness to close the critical Strait of Hormuz and cut off global energy supplies. The next day, Trump baselessly accused news outlets of running AI propaganda and said they should be tried for treason. Trump's initial post singled out the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, but Carr's threat was clearly aimed at the newsrooms of cable broadcasters such as CBS, CNN, and NBC. The FCC controls licensing for the local stations operated by major broadcasters, giving regulators serious leverage over their ability to reach viewers and sustain local newsrooms. Looming over Carr's threats is the proposed $110 billion merger between Paramount, Skydance, and Warner Brothers Discovery, which would put the newsrooms at CNN and CBS under control of the same media empire owned by Larry Ellison, a billionaire oligarch, Trump ally, and Republican mega-donor. In 2025, the FCC approved an $8 billion merger between Paramount Global and Skydance Media only after CBS made very public concessions to Trump, including agreeing to pay $16 million to his presidential library to settle a lawsuit over edits to a 60 Minutes interview with then presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Free speech advocates said CBS should have fought the case and would have likely won under the First Amendment. CBS also essentially agreed to air more conservative viewpoints while installing a right-wing pundit, Barry Weiss, as editor-in-chief, which Carr trumpeted as a political victory. Weiss brought with her a wave of layoffs and resignations. A couple weeks later, CBS announced it would cancel Stephen Colbert's late-night show, citing cost overruns. Colbert often mocked Trump, who celebrated the show's demise. If this Paramount, Skydance, and Warner Brothers Discovery merger is finalized and approved by regulators, in the Trump administration, which the president says he wants, Ellison is expected to move both CBS and CNN into a pro-Trump direction and remake the U.S. media landscape. Carr said the FCC would likely play a minimal role in the merger, but Democrats in Congress are demanding a full review under the FCC's foreign ownership rules because the deal includes investments from foreign wealth funds in Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Echoing Trump, Carr's March 14th post threatens to withhold broadcast licenses to claim that there is something very wrong with the media when a political candidate such as Trump is able to win a landslide election victory in the face of hoaxes and distortions. In reality, Trump won the popular vote by a slim 1.5% margin. Broadcasters that are running hoaxes and news distortions, also known as fake news, have a chance now to correct course before their license renewals come up, Carr said. This indirect threat is a classic example of censorship by jawboning, a form of coercion involving public threats and pressure by people in positions of authority, according to Seth Stern, the advocacy director at the Freedom of the Press Foundation. Jawboning is generally the theory that the government coerced or pressured someone to censor themselves, rather than ordering them to do so, or legally compelling them to do so in a manner that would more clearly violate the First Amendment. The idea is that jawboning is not a workaround when you can't legislate directly or seek an injunction directly due to constitutional law, and you can't achieve the same effects through threats and pressure. Experts say jawboning is one of several tactics Trump and his appointees are deploying to promote propaganda and exert control over the media, and a glaring example of Republican hypocrisy on issues of free speech and the First Amendment. During the COVID-19 pandemic, as millions of people died from the virus, conservatives spent years attacking the Biden administration for pressuring social media companies to enforce their own content standards and remove misinformation about social distancing and vaccines. Trump issued an executive order on his first day in office condemning the previous administration for infringing on free speech rights by pressuring social media sites to moderate content on life-saving health and safety information. Conservative influencers and the Attorney General of Missouri sued the Biden administration over its influence on social media, but the Supreme Court ultimately found the plaintiffs lacked standing. Two of the plaintiffs, Martin Kulldorff and Jayanta Bhattacharya, were dropped from the lawsuit after getting jobs in the Trump administration. On March 24th, the Trump administration voluntarily settled with the remaining plaintiffs outside of court and agreed that speech labeled misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation does not make it constitutionally unprotected, according to the New Civil Liberties Alliance, which represented the plaintiffs. This is a massive win for the First Amendment and for every American who believes in free speech, said Missouri Republican Senator Eric Schmidt, a far-right Trump supporter, in a statement on March 24th. David Green, senior counsel and free speech watchdog at the Electric Frontier Foundation, said it's sort of galling to see Schmidt declare a big victory while the Trump administration targets visa holders for making political statements on social media and demands that tech companies block access to apps that track immigration raids. With the ownership consolidation that any other administration would have taken a serious look at on antitrust grounds, and with a jawboning from the FCC commissioner who is interpreting the public interest as towing the government line, that's all really concerning, Green said. Stern said the Trump administration's decision to settle out of court with its own political allies was a no-brainer. This is a tactic the administration has used before, settling lawsuits brought by the conservatives against federal practices that the Trump administration would like to do away with anyway and thereby short-circuit the legislative and rulemaking process. So it's certainly hypocritical, at least for the Trump administration, to continue to fixate on what Biden did 5 or 6 years ago when it is doing exponentially worse right now. Stern said Trump's social media posts are not innocuous complaints, but another instance of the jawboning tactics Trump officials deploy constantly against critics. Brendan Carr telling broadcasters he's going to pull their licenses over Iran reporting, or Houseless telling reporters he'll pull their press passes if they publish unauthorized information, the list goes on, Stern said. All of this is far more direct than anything Joe Biden has ever been accused of doing, Stern said. Unlike under Biden, when social media companies were wary of losing a shield against legal liability under proposed reforms, the Trump administration's threats are not implied but explicitly posted on social media. Any Republican official who is vocal about Biden's jawboning but silent now is somebody who probably doesn't deserve to be taken seriously when it comes to principled application of the First Amendment, Stern said. You can find that article on Truthout. That was Mike Ludwig, published on March 26th. Trump isn't just bullying journalists, he's subverting the First Amendment. All right, I think we're going to close out the show a little bit early today. I want to thank y'all for listening. This has been Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo or online at Media Cyphers on widerfm.org. We got a web stream. We got the Wider app you can download, listen Wider anywhere in the world. You can also find Wider on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. I want to thank y'all for listening, and until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.